Recording from a janitor's closet next to a cafeteria dumpster where the chicken nuggets go to die, it's your host, Donovan.
Welcome back to Deep Dives in the Shallow End, where we explore the crumbling cornerstones of civilization and try not to trip over the abandoned milk cartons of our own idealism. I'm your not-so-expert host, Donovan, and today we're diving into a world of mystery meat, humiliating debt cycles, and federally sanctioned ketchup logic. Yes, indeed, folks, we're talking about the hellscape that is American school lunches. Imagine a place where your sense of self-worth is defined by whether or not your lunch account is $1.50 in the red. A place where pizza counts as a vegetable isn't just a punchline but actual policy. A place where the words meat product are legally distinct from meat, and where shame is served with a side of low-fat chocolate milk. This isn't a dystopian novel or a deleted scene from Soylent Green. Rather, this is lunch period in public schools across the United States. It's one period of the day where kids should be allowed to stop pretending to care about the War of 1812 and just eat something that doesn't smell like industrial despair. But instead, it's often a parade of underfunded, overprocessed indignities masquerading as meals. Today we'll be asking the hard questions. How did we get here? Why is there a literal market in shaming children for being hungry? Who profits from these culinary crimes against humanity? And could it be everyone? So strap in or tray up, because we're about to take a cafeteria tray through the lunch line of American education policy, corporate greed, and institutionalized neglect. And let me tell you, none of this tastes like chicken.
Deep dives in the shallow end.
Picture it, if you will. America, 1946. The boys are back from the war. The suburbs are rising like beige phoenixes, and Congress, drunk on victory and surplus cheese, passes the National School Lunch Act. Why? Because someone had the bright idea that a child who eats something other than rock soup and whatever withered produce they managed to coax from a failing victory garden might do better in school. The National School Lunch Program, or the NSLP, was originally conceived as a patriotic double whammy: fight childhood malnutrition and find something to do with the USDA's obscene surplus of commodities. Turns out, if you buy too much government cheese, eventually you have to do something with it besides hoarding it in limestone caves in Missouri. And yes, that is what they were doing with it. Come to find out that the only things that flourish in Missouri caves are the Mormons who survived the extermination order, another real thing, and the members of the Atticus Blanche clan whose family tree has fewer branches than a palm tree, a fake thing. In theory, it was noble: feed the kids, build the nation, create a healthier generation. In practice, it was also a Trojan horse wheeled in by dairy lobbies, meat lobbies, and agriculture barons who figured out that if you slap an American flag on a tray of tater tots, you can call it policy. Fast forward to the Reagan era, when budget cuts were in vogue and nutrition standards were about as welcome as an addiction counselor at a Motley Crue concert. In 1981, the USDA proposed classifying ketchup as a vegetable, because when you're trying to justify slashing $1 billion from child nutrition programs, suddenly the tomato content in a packet of Heinz starts looking like a salad. By the 1990s and 2000s, the cafeteria had fully transformed into a battleground for corporate influence. Enter companies like Sodexo, Aramac, and Chartwell's, outsourcing giants that turned school meals into reheated simulations of sustenance. Cost-cutting became the mission. Nutrition was collateral damage. Contrast this with countries like France and Japan, where school lunches are treated as part of the educational curriculum. Meals are cooked on site, eaten communally, and designed to teach kids about nutrition, culture, and moderation. The crazy part is that these are funded through taxes, so there are no lunch line cashiers. In America, school lunch is a speed run through the food pyramid while dodging shame, debt, and the occasional Band-Aid that was holding that fingernail on. So how did we go from New Deal nourishment to nacho cheese nihilism? Simple. We commodified hunger. And when you let capitalism set the table, don't be surprised when your main course comes prepackaged, flash frozen, and morally ambiguous. But let's say you're 8 years old. You just spent your morning trying not to cry during a timed multiplication test, your mom's on her third shift of the week, and your stomach sounds like a dying car engine. You step into the cafeteria line hoping for some comfort in the form of a rectangular piece of lukewarm pizza or a facsimile thereof. But instead, the lunch lady informs you that your account is negative. You owe 3 small and you've reached your debt limit. No food for you. You try to explain that the trifecta on the classroom hamster races didn't come through and that you need a little breathing room, but she remains steadfast. No cash, no chocolate milk, and chicky nugs. And, by the way, Large Marge reminds you that the VIG on that tater top tab is 10 points a week. Interestingly, the number of fingers on those pretty little hands. And she doesn't want to see your face until you got the scratch. In a country where billionaires collect yachts, like I do Backney, and corporations dodge taxes with the finesse of Olympic gymnasts, children are being denied food because their lunch accounts are short by a few bucks. Enter lunch debt, a uniquely American invention where public schools operate like debt collectors and children are collateral damage in the war on budgets. What, you think because you're 10 you get a free ride? The first taste ain't free, commie. It gets darker. Some schools have enacted alternate meals for kids with outstanding balances, typically a cold cheese sandwich and a carton of milk, which is better than when I was a kid. You got a full-size tray with 2 crackers and a little scoop of peanut butter. It's a kind of culinary scarlet letter designed to humiliate. Others have refused to serve lunch at all, thrown trays in the trash in front of classmates, or branded students with stamps reading, "I need lunch money." All of this in the name of fiscal responsibility and a fear of creating dependency. We yearn for the Industrial Revolution model where everyone has to sing for their supper, even if their testicles haven't yet descended. You'd be forgiven for thinking this was some twisted subplot from a dystopian young adult novel, but no, it's just another twisted subplot from dystopian Cold War-era policy still shambling through our schools like a bureaucratic zombie. We're the wealthiest nation on Earth, one that wastes, on average, 40% of its food supply, mind you, treats feeding children as negotiable line items. The psychological impact of this brand of institutional shame can last far longer than any stomachache, embedding poverty into a child's self-concept one skipped Taco Tuesday at a time. The only shame a child should have to endure in this country is if they don't have the right clothes, tech, or bone structure, for crying out loud. And it's not like this debt goes away. Districts have sent collection agencies after parents. In some cases, school officials have threatened foster care referrals for unpaid lunch bills, and that's not hyperbole, it's a documented escalation. Imagine missing a payment and losing your child, not the Rent-A-Center flat screen you've been struggling to pay off at 30% for the last 6 years. It's so grim that private citizens and even some celebrities occasionally swoop in to pay off lunch debts en masse like morally confused fairy godparents. But even that can be controversial. School districts have refused donations in order to preserve the sanctity of the punishment. Some superintendent looked at Carnegie's Gospel of Wealth, spit on it, kissed her framed photo of Ronald Reagan, and smiled quietly to herself, knowing that there will be no deadbeat kids on her watch. Oh yes, she will sleep well tonight. So what's the lesson here? If you're poor, hungry, and under 18, the state will make sure you feel it. So if you thought the only thing being served in the cafeteria was food, think again. Shame is always on the menu, and it's a free all-you-can-eat buffet. But all right, let's pull back the sneeze guard and take a long, unblinking look at what's actually being served in America's school cafeterias. Because if you thought the emotional damage was the only thing getting microwaved, oh baby, do I have some news for you. Let's begin with the legendary status of the aforementioned classic staple of the institutional chuck wagon, the rectangular pizza. Is it edible? Is it pizza? Is it drywall that spent a semester abroad in Naples? Who can say? But every kid remembers the bizarre ecstasy of biting into that tepid, rubbery, paradoxically stiff slice with a sauce so sweet Big Pharma was probably drooling at their long-term prospects, villainously whispering, "See you soon." And this was one of the more beloved options. Then there's the meat, or, to be legally accurate, the meat product. A linguistic loophole that allows schools to serve foodstuffs that are technically edible but spiritually vacant. Like when I take communion at midnight mass just to please my Italian nonna. At least there's wine. Because daddy don't go to church, much less in the middle of the night, without a nice vino collapso. And the chicken nuggets? Reconstituted slurry molded into a shape that we've been convinced is natural bird part geometry by our friends at McDonald's. Beef taco filling? Might contain beef. Might also contain soy, oats, textured vegetable protein, and the fulfilled dreams of the meat scrap sweeper at the pork rendering plant. And don't even get me started on the milk. Flavored milk is often pushed in cafeterias to meet federal nutrition guidelines, which results in chocolate milk with more sugar than a can of Coke. But it's dairy, so it's fine, because calcium cancels out diabetes. That's just good science. It's the same reason I order my daiquiris with a buttermilk back. The whole system is gamed to meet the bare minimums of USDA guidelines while maximizing shelf life, minimizing cost, and making sure no one gets sued. Which is why you'll see things like ketchup, pickle relish, or even pizza sauce being counted as vegetables. And it's not a joke. This is real on-the-books Reagan policy history. It's the same logic that put packs of Lucky Strikes in soldiers' MREs. Tobacco is a plant, plants are healthy, ergo, smoking counts as a serving of vegetables. That and you had to infuse all that commie air with a little freedom. School cafeterias have become dumping grounds for surplus agriculture products held together by industrial adhesives and whatever logic brought us the food pyramid and the Vietnam War. The USDA buys up excess commodities to stabilize prices, then ships them off to schools. It's not so much a nutrition plan as it is a meat and cheese laundering operation. You've got to love the elegance of a capitalist society that subsidizes farmers to grow commodities, buys the surplus with tax dollars, and then sells it back to your kids, assuming they can afford it. So while kids in France are learning about regional cuisine and portion control, American students are choosing between sport-compatible mystery stew and beef-like protein pucks in Tex-Mex drizzle. And yet, we wonder why there are issues of rising childhood obesity somehow combined with nutritional deficiencies. Silver lining, childhood literacy rates are on the decline, so most of them won't be able to read the nutrition label anyway. Now, let's take a brief detour into the one moment in modern American history when the school lunch system actually made a lick of moral sense: the COVID-19 pandemic. It was a time of uncertainty, fear, and banana bread. Schools shut down, the economy tanked, and millions of kids suddenly lost access to their most consistent meals. So the government did something truly unprecedented. They made school meals free for everyone. No paperwork, no income verification, no lunch shaming. Just food for kids. Who needed it? A radical display of noblesse oblige, or as my uncle, who has enjoyed disability benefits since Carter, would say, socialism. Through a series of USDA waivers, districts were allowed to hand out free meals regardless of eligibility. Some sent meals home for the week, some offered curbside pickup, others even delivered them by school bus, like an Amazon Prime van driven by a deeply underpaid guidance counselor. It didn't stop at weekdays either. The waivers permitted schools to offer food over weekends and holidays. It was as if, for a brief shining moment, someone at the USDA realized that hunger, unlike my keto diet, doesn't take Saturdays off. And you'll never guess what happened. Participation increased, stigma decreased, parents felt relief, and kids ate. A hammer and sickle didn't spontaneously materialize over the old stars and stripes because a poor kid got a chicken sandwich without producing a W-2. It was almost like universal access to food could be a good thing. But alas, all things that make sense must end. The waivers expired in 2022. Despite bipartisan praise for the temporary measures, Congress let them lapse like my health insurance when it came down to that or my house payment. Some states stepped up. California and Maine, for example, now offer universal free meals, but many others went straight back to the Dickensian punch clock. The pandemic didn't just expose cracks in the system, it lit them on fire and then tried to patch them with masking tape and capitalist rhetoric. And the second the panic faded, so did the political will to feed kids without condition. Because in America, every solution is temporary and every moral victory is subject to budget reconciliation. So now we're back to the pre-pandemic status quo where eligibility forms, reduced price tiers, and unpaid balances are once again clogging up the line right next to the desiccated mac and cheese. Because why fix a broken system when you can just duct tape it, slap a mission accomplished banner on the wall, and call it a celebration? And what were we celebrating specifically? A system in which food access is determined not by need, but by bureaucratic gatekeeping and administrative whim. The very same reasons that many of these kids won't be able to afford their insulin in about 15 years. And of course, no regressive policy shift would be complete without a healthy dose of moral panic. Some lawmakers have argued that providing free meals to all students, including those whose families can technically afford it, is wasteful. Because as we all know, the real danger isn't childhood hunger, it's the potential that someone might get a sad plate of buttered noodles they didn't desperately need. After all, wealthy kids are clearly abandoning their Wagyu beef sliders with black truffle aioli on artisanal broche, tossing aside their alkaline water just to line up for a free cafeteria tray in order to make sure that their parents are getting their tax dollars worth. But let's be honest, this of course is not about cost. The federal government spends more maintaining decommissioned golf courses on military bases than it would take to provide universal free meals in schools. This is about ideology. It's about drawing lines between the deserving and the undeserving, between those who are allowed to eat with dignity and those who are forced to earn it, one brightly colored reduced lunch application at a time. In this framework, feeding kids becomes less about nutrition and more about moral conditioning, a transactional model that says food is a privilege, not a right. You want a meal? Prove your hardship. Show your receipts. Submit your poverty paperwork. Only then do we decide whether you're worth a warm quesadilla and a plastic-wrapped side of diced pears. Because in America, the free market is sacred and the stomach is political, and there is no such thing as a free lunch. So what would it actually look like to fix this mess? Well, for starters, we could feed kids, all of them, without paperwork, without shaming, without requiring a Kafkaesque performance of poverty at the altar of administrative efficiency. Universal free meals would not just be a moral improvement, they'd be a practical one. Districts waste enormous time and money processing meal applications, chasing down lunch debt, and managing tiered pricing systems that can cost more to run than they save. Feeding every student the same meal is cheaper, faster, and eliminates the need for cafeteria surveillance states where the angry gal in accounting tracks your kid's milk consumption like it's a matter of national security. In fact, we won't need her position anymore, so perhaps her sacrifice can sate your bloodlust. as long as someone's going without, right? And yet, we don't do this, because keeping food conditional preserves the illusion that hunger is a moral failure, not a systemic one. That if a child is hungry, it's due to their family's laziness or mismanagement, not a social structure engineered to squeeze people dry and then charge them for the pleasure. But what if school lunches were treated like textbooks, desks, or access to a functioning fire exit? What if food was seen as a baseline requirement for learning, not a reward for compliance or financial success? There are movements pushing for this. Some states are leading the charge, and organizations like the School Nutrition Association have advocated for permanent universal free meal policies. But the opposition, political, economic, ideological, is still fierce. Lobbyists from the dairy, meat, and processed food industries wield tremendous influence over what ends up on those trays, not because it's healthy, but because it's profitable. So we end up with a cafeteria that serves less as a source of nourishment and more as a showroom for agricultural surplus, where pizza sauce is a vegetable, chocolate milk is medicine, and everything comes pre-approved by the National Council for the Maintenance of Appearances. If the lunchroom is a reflection of our national values, then we've got some pretty rancid priorities. We could build a food system that uplifts, equalizes, and actually fuels learning, but that would mean letting go of the fantasy that dignity must be earned. Until then, lunch will remain what it has always been, a tray full of contradictions served lukewarm and eaten under fluorescent lights. So what have we learned from our journey through the American school cafeteria? That a place intended to nourish young minds has become a reflection of our nation's most perverse values: performative austerity, corporate grift, and the moralization of need. We could feed every child in this country without shame, without paperwork, without drama, but we choose not to. Because it's never just about food, it's about teaching the next generation what matters most: scarcity, hierarchy, and the enduring American principle that if you want a full stomach, you'd better learn to beg for it properly. Remember your cafeteria tray? Now imagine designing that meal with Jeff Bezos whispering in your ear and Congress nuking the food pyramid from orbit. That's our reality. That is, until we decide that dignity, like lunch, should be universal. So until next time, take care of yourselves and others. I hope you'll join me on the next episode.
Dives in the shallow end, dives in the shallow end. Deep dives in the shallow